Okay, good morning, Eden. So, as I mentioned yesterday, we're going to start with looking at the Rebbe's Haggadah, Rebbe's commentary on the custom of not eating Seder item foods on Erev Pesach so that you have an appetite for them at the Seder, including the maror and so on. So, the Alter Rebbe wrote in the Shulchan Aruch that certainly there's the halacha, one does not eat matzah all day. That's established. We don't eat matzah the day of Erev Pesach, although our custom is actually to stop eating matzah 30 days before. But halakha, sorry. From dry halacha, one is forbidden from eating Erev Pesach, try again. And then the Alter Rebbe added that there are those who don't eat fruits, or at least the ones that go into the mix of the charaises, so that they have an appetite. And the Alter Rebbe said, don't concern yourself with that, because the whole point of the charaises is not really for you to enjoy it anyway. The point of the charaises is to offset any toxicities from the maror. And in fact, you shake off most of it because you want to get rid of the toxicity from the maror, but you don't want to soften the maror's bitterness. So there's not really any reason to be enjoying and having a appetite for the charaises. It's a sidebar. So Alter Rebbe says, that's what Alter Rebbe writes in the Siddur. Okay, and likewise, he mentioned some who don't eat maror and Erev Pesach, that they have an appetite for it. Some who minimize in eating matzah on day 2, so that they have an appetite on night 2 for matzah. You have to have some matzah because you have a meal, but minimize. Others who
day 1 for night 2.
Day 1 for night 2. I'm sorry. Yes, correct. Others don't have maror on day 1 or day 2. So let's see where the custom of Chabad is in the Rebbe's Haggadah. As I mentioned before, and God willing, starting, you may have seen this in Mosaic, but starting next Monday, not this week, so a week from this Monday, this series we've been doing on Shabbos afternoon is going to move to the week, because the clock is changing next month of Shabbos. So Mincha is going to be very early. It's going to be very difficult to get everybody to come back for an hour before Mincha. So we're going to move it during the week to the week, Monday nights. We're going to do between now and the winter break, so 5-part series on the history of halacha. We've been talking about this, understanding the history of halacha. We'll be here live, but I'll be recording it, God willing.
But it'll still be the Giants?
So we're calling it Meet the Giants, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us through the iconic people who shaped halacha from the beginning till the end, and in learning about who they are, we'll learn how halacha evolved. So
I think it's fascinating because you hear about all these people's names, but you never have a clue who they are.
Yeah. And when you look at them on a page, you see them all as in one time, place, and thing, but it's not. They're centuries apart, and you have to understand where they're coming from, why they're coming, or why this one speaks here.
Yeah.
Why you follow this one, not that one.
I'm saying
and so we'll get into all of it.
If you ask who's the Maharal of Rottenburg, they're going to say the author of this book. I couldn't read this book, so what does it mean to me?
Yeah. So we're going to be doing that's it's going to be like a bird's eye view of all of Jewish history from halacha. God willing, it's going to be a pamphlet with timelines and everything. It's all in the works. God willing.
Yeah.
Now, the last of the 5-part series, I'm going to do the first is going to be till the Talmudic period, and the post-Talmudic period, the Rishonim period, Rambam, Rashi, that Maram also, and then the post-Rishonim period going into the modern period, and then the last class is going to be Chabad custom in the context of all that halacha. So when we get there, we're going to see a little bit more about the Haggadah. But as I mentioned many times, the Rebbe made it his mission in the early years to bring together and consolidate Chabad custom. Halacha is not the Shulchan Aruch, clear, but then there are customs. Like, for example, Alter mentions customs here about what we do eat or don't eat on Erev Pesach. He doesn't state them as in this is the custom of my community. He's talking about what Jews do as a whole. So he says some communities do this, some communities do that, but doesn't say what does our community do. And right?
Is that where garlic comes from?
Like not eating garlic?
Yeah.
On Pesach?
Yeah.
It is Chabad custom not to eat garlic, but it comes from predates Chabad.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so we're going to go through all of that. So the Rebbe, now custom is exactly that. It's custom. Now, until it's written down, it's not codified. Until such time, it's like, okay, what do you do in your town? What does your family do? And you keep on going, right? So whoever had a more clear, direct line to the Rebbe's will have customs in their home that follow what the Rebbe's have done. If you're a little farther away and you don't get access to seeing what the Rebbe did, you heard from someone who said that this, so then you practice that way, and maybe the custom's a little variant. It's not. So even in the span of a couple of generations, like the 6-7 generations of Chabad, the customs can diverge as time goes on. Right? Never made it his mission to research, first of all, observing his father-in-law, what his practice was, observing his own father, what his practice was, and then asking Hasidim of old time who were in the courts of the Rebbe's to find out what the legit practices are, and then put them together. And that's where the Sefer Menhagim comes from. The book of Menhagim that we have is that compilation of custom, and a lot of it is collected in the Rebbe's Haggadah, at least custom that are related to the Seder night. Yeah.
So, but practically speaking, first night Seder with the Rebbe, I don't think he had guests at his house, right?
Okay. Actually, the Rebbe's Seder, the previous Rebbe used to have guests.
Right.
The Rebbe was much more private than the Rebbe before him, and so the Rebbe's home was off limits to
everyone,
99.9% of people.
Just him and
very few people that the Rebbe invited into the home for personal relationship and whatnot. She was a very private person, as was the Rebbe.
He must have been insulting a lot of people.
Yeah, but in the old day, maybe some people got insulted, but there were people who were like, quote, the inner circle, and they were invited by the previous Rebbe. Maybe the mashpiyim, the people who are rabbis, leaders, or community leaders, whatever, people were invited to the Rebbe's home. It wasn't. And the previous Rebbe had that practice too, even in America. And so long as the previous Rebbe's wife was living, she kept on hosting the Yom Tov meals in her home, and guests were invited. So, which meant the table was set like this, and the seat at the head was empty because the previous Rebbe had passed away. And to the right of the empty chair was the previous Rebbe's older son-in-law, Rabbi Gerari, the Rashag, and to the left of the previous Rebbe's empty chair was the Rebbe. So you have a whole Seder night without the previous Rebbe. De facto, the leader of the Seder becomes the Rebbe, although there was someone else who was the official reader, was appointed to be leader. Even I think he was reader even at the times of the previous Rebbe. The previous Rebbe had a hard time talking in his later life. He had multiple sclerosis, paralyzed somewhat. So there was someone else who would read, but the Rebbe was the de facto leader. People would watch the Rebbe. So there were people around the table who observed the Rebbe do a Seder for many, many, many years until the previous Rebbe's wife passed away in 1974, I think, 73, 74. And then once the previous Rebbe's wife passed away, Rebbe went to having a private Seder with his wife.
In his own house.
In his own house. Just the attendant. That was it. It was an attendant, like a waiter attendant.
Exactly.
That's it. So for those years, many people have observed the Rebbe's Seder. There's lots of detail and custom we have. There's lots of beautiful descriptions of the Rebbe's Seder, especially all the people who write about it and talk about it, all remark on the incredible manner in which the Rebbe would read the Hallel. They would say every single word out loud, slowly, and just nonstop flow of tears going. Like very unique.
Hallel was happy though.
Yeah, but it wasn't. There were times when Rebbe would cry, like when he would speak, and he couldn't get through the sentence because he was choked up. Here, Rebbe was speaking actually very clearly and very flowing and with a beautiful tune, but just like tears flowing down. Like, can't tell what it is, but this is the description that's been told. Anyway, all to say that there is the observance of the Rebbe's at Seders. Right. So that's been collected, and the Rebbe did that to his father-in-law. I mentioned this morning to someone that during the story of the case with the stolen books from Chabad, I never spoke about it publicly. I never also spoke about himself personally then, which is very rare. My father just commented to your members that the entire community was shocked that the Rebbe would speak that way about himself. And then the Rebbe said, like, I'm not a lawyer. I don't know why I'm being sucked into this whole thing. This fight over books. I'm not a lawyer. It's not my job. And he said, my job is to look at a question in Rambam. If I have an answer, don't have an answer. My issue is to deal with a question that might have a Rambam. Or my job is to observe my father-in-law's practice, see if I can understand it, meaning his custom, his halachic custom, to see if I can understand it, to see if I can explain it.
The Rebbe said this?
By himself, yeah. Like he was like saying annoyed is not a nice word, but like expressing frustration at the fact that he has to deal with lawyers and fighting over someone stealing books. But what I would like to do is teach and learn Rambam and teach and learn about my father-in-law's practice and how he behaves so that everybody knows what to do in halacha, which is a beautiful thing. Anyway, okay. So all to say that in Rebbe's Haggadah, there is this codification of halachic practice. Now, there was commentary in the Haggadah, like any other good commentary, runs along the Haggadah. It'll quote the relevant sections of the Haggadah and then comment on it.
So one quick question.
Yeah.
Wasn't the Rebbe's information via the Shulchan Aruch available at the time?
Yes.
So
But the Shulchan Aruch doesn't necessarily tell us what Chabad practices.
Didn't compile minhagim.
It did, but the Shulchan Aruch was not necessarily geared for Chabad per se. It was geared for the world as a whole.
Right.
He was collecting all the customs and conclusions of halacha from the previous collection, the Shulchan Aruch, before him until his day, and making it available to the public.
But he wouldn't put that.
But he wouldn't say anywhere in parentheses, by the way, our custom in my community in Chabad is to do X. There's nowhere in the Shulchan Aruch to say that. In fact, whenever it says in our communities this is what we do, what he means is Ashkenazim as a whole. And sometimes actually the Chabad practice won't be like Ashkenazim, will be like the Sephardim.
It's interesting why that wouldn't have been this.
Okay, he wrote it in an earlier stage in life, much earlier, before he became Rebbe of Chabad. He wrote it at the behest of his Rebbe, the Maggid of Mezrich, before he even became Rebbe.
Okay. So
and the instruction he was given was collect all halachic custom and practice from the day the Shulchan Aruch and make it available, which is what he did. It wasn't necessarily like, okay, I have a community, I have to give them a guidebook. That's not necessarily how it evolved. That's right. That's exactly right. The Siddur was different because the Siddur he did compile for his community to use. So you'll see even differences between the Siddur and Shulchan Aruch. And certainly when it comes to custom, which is more nuanced.
One thing I just want to make a comment about the holiday is that there's a saying called tears of joy.
Yeah.
And holiday is a joyful thing, but the melodies are so beautiful.
It's moving.
It's moving.
Right. That's what I'm saying. I don't
get tears.
Get tears. Yeah. That's what it seems like. That's why I'm describing it that way. Like Rebbe didn't choke up and he couldn't get through the words. There were times when Rebbe did that publicly. You can hear the recordings of it. But this is Rebbe would sing it actually very melodically, but with tears coming down his face.
When we sing the niggins.
Sure. Yeah, even if it's not sad per se, moving.
Deep.
Yeah. Okay, so let's look at this. So this particular section is the Rebbe's comment on the Shulchan Aruch. Shulchan Aruch not as in the Code of Jewish Law, but Shulchan Aruch as in the set table. Step number, 10, 11 in the Seder? Somewhere there. We'll work backwards. Nirtza, Hallel, Beirach, Safon, Shulchan Aruch. So it's number 10. Number 11, sorry, because it's 15 steps. Step number 11. Okay, so Shulchan Aruch is step number 11. So he comments on the step and tells us different things and customs about Shulchan Aruch. Yeah. So first he says, if you look at the top, so we're looking below the line on the top right, yeah? And where like the words are Nakudas. You see? Shulchan Aruch in big bold letters on the right?
Yeah.
Okay, so the first paragraph he says, our custom is we don't lean throughout the meal.
Huh.
We don't lean left. There are those who are particular to lean left. They're even during the meal.
How is that a custom?
For people to lean left during the meal?
What? It's written that's one of the basic, like drinking the 4 cups and leaning left. And
no, we're talking about the meal. You're eating your chicken, your fish, your soup.
Right.
You have to lean left when you do that.
No, I don't know.
Some do. We don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So where does the leaning apply?
Wine.
To wine and matzah.
Oh, okay.
Right? Which we'll get to, by the way, when we get to the Gemara. But we don't, that's not our custom. We don't lean to the left during the meal. Although, I remember I know I read it. The Rebbe once said about his father, that his father would lean left quite a lot during the meal, during the Seder, not just during the wine and the matzah as is required by halacha, to the point that he would even lean left when he'd have a cigarette post-Seder. So everything was lean. There was father. But nonetheless, he says here, our custom is we don't lean left. We're talking in a time in the 20s and 30s when everybody assumed cigarettes were normal. Nobody assumed cigarettes were unhealthy. So apparently there was father would lean to the left even during having a cigarette.
You weren't cool if you didn't smoke.
Sorry?
You weren't cool if you didn't
It was normal. I don't think it was a thing of trying to be cool. In the 80s, it was cool to smoke. In the 90s, then it was just normal. Okay, and then he says that our custom is to begin the meal with the egg dipped in salt water. That's not just unique to Chabad. This is probably universal. Then he goes on to say that our custom is to make sure that the matzah doesn't get wet. This is the first time you're having matzah, not in the context of the mitzvah, right? You haven't eaten matzah all day because you're not allowed to. You just had matzah for your mitzvah. Before Shulchan Aruch, you had matzah, right? The order is you finish this reading the Haggadah and it's rachza, you wash your hands, moitzi matzah, eat matzah, marer koirech, and then you have your meal. So when you have moitzi, matzah, and koirach, at those points, you're eating matzah plain, obviously, because you're just eating it for the mitzvah. But now that your meal's starting, and you could, if you want, eat any matzah as you want. So now he puts in the custom. That's so you know, our custom is don't dip that matzah into any liquid.
You're reminding me of the
Yeah.
halakha you taught also, is that when you wash your hands for a motzi, your hands have to be very dry because it's disrespectful to get bread wet.
So certainly with matzah. So here we're like very, very particular. And he goes on to say, make sure that the matzah you're having at the table is covered, so just in case something spills and doesn't get your matzah wet.
But is that also a factored reason? That's not just for the rising of chametz?
It doesn't mention that here.
Okay.
Now, in this very same paragraph, where he describes the particularity with which we are careful not to make sure the matzah is not wet, right? Right, and he says even before you, let's say he says if you're pouring water out into another cup, make sure that the cup doesn't have any crumbs of matzah in there, right? And then he says he says this here, not later, but he says when you get to benching, and when you do ma'am achronim, our custom is not to do this on Pesach, because if you have crumbs on your lips, you're going to make them wet with during the year you wash your fingertips for ma'am achronim and you rub it on your mouth. Mm-hmm. Pesach, don't do that because you might get your crumbs wet. Then, and he says the same thing is true throughout the entire 7 days of Pesach, except for the last day of Pesach when we actually do get the matzah wet. And then after the parentheses in the bottom right column. Erev Pesach, starting from the morning of Erev Pesach, ad achere koidach shel seder hasheni, till after koidach of the second seder, ein oichlin, we don't eat, mikol haminim, from all the food items, hanachnosim that are included, becharoises umarar. So we learned a number of things here that is not in the Shulchan Aruch. Well, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say explicitly is our custom. Number one, he says the custom that the Shulchan Aruch says not to have Morah Erev Pesach, we do that too. The custom which is not to have Morah on the second day of Pesach, we also do that because he says until after Koirach of the second night, right? Which is when you're finished with the mitzvah obligation of matzah and maror.
You mean the first day?
Of the second night, until after the second koirach. Right? You following or not?
Yeah.
Till after the second night koirach. After the second night koirach, that's your last time you're doing the mitzvah of eating matzah and maror.
Yeah, second night of Pesach.
Second night of Pesach, and koirach is the last one because you eat moitzi, matzah, maror, koirach. Koirach is your sandwich of matzah and maror together. That's your last obligatory matzah and maror. So until that point, we don't eat any maror. So first of all, we're taking the custom not to eat maror on day one, and we're taking the custom not to eat maror on day two. He adds, we don't eat any of the items that enter into the chazeroisis and the maror, which means whatever maror you're going to have, that includes romaine lettuce and horseradish. No eating any of that on day one or day two, on Erev Pesach and day one of Pesach. So salad, no lettuce on day one of Pesach. Okay. He also added that even though the Shulchan Aruch says there's no reason to refrain from eating, the Shulchan Aruch says like this: some have a custom. You can look at the Shulchan Aruch, take it. It's 471. The other booklet, it's halacha 12 in English. There are those who are even more stringent, who are accustomed, halacha 12. See it? There are those even more stringent who are accustomed to not eat fruits on the day before Pesach, nor during the day on the first day of Pesach, so they will eat charoises with an appetite. So the Shulchan Aruch says we don't eat what?
Apple.
Whatever fruits go into your charoises. Some apple, I think some also have pear. Okay, but it's the fruit specifically he said here. And then he concludes by saying, don't waste your time with this custom. So first of all, the Rebbe says our custom is to actually not eat these things. Actually, the custom that the Alter Rebbe said in the Shulchan Aruch doesn't have any halachic basis. The custom is that we actually do it. Meaning we do follow that custom. We don't eat of the charoises. And then he added something else. He didn't just say don't eat the fruits that are in the Pesach, in the charoises. Look at the language in the Rebbe's Haggadah. Yeah? In Haggadah, look at the language in Haggadah, you see? Here, look carefully. Ein oich, we don't eat. The second to last line in the right-hand column. Third to last word. Ein oichlim, don't eat. Mikol haminim, from any of the items, hanachnosim, which go into the charoises. Which means not just don't eat the fruit, don't eat the nuts either. So not only is he keeping the custom which the Shulchan Aruch said they don't really need to, because hey, the charoises is not meant for you to enjoy anyway. It's only there to offset the toxicity of the maror, and you're supposed to shake it off anyway, so you don't outshine the maror, and therefore there's no reason to refrain from eating apples and fruit on Erev Pesach. Said the Rebbe in the Siddur, our custom is actually to not eat apple, not to eat the fruit that goes into the charoises, and not only that, not to eat anything that goes into the charoises, which would include nuts as well. I mentioned yesterday that we don't eat egg Erev Pesach. I don't see it written here. I'm sorry, I made that's a mistake. But certainly maybe there's other place that's a more see, but here it doesn't say it. Nothing that goes into the charoises in the moror. On day one, I'm sorry, Erev Pesach and day one of Pesach, because you still have to prepare for the second night Seder. So your Shabbos day salad, your first day Yom Tov salad shouldn't have nuts in it, shouldn't have apples in it, and shouldn't have lettuce in it.
Lettuce just in romaine.
Romaine lettuce specifically, yes. And no horseradish if you like to have that with your soup. Some people like to have horseradish with their soup. It's a thing. So none of that because you have horseradish for the moror. Okay. Now what's interesting is
like the real horseradish.
Why is that? Sorry.
The real grated horseradish, the real root vegetable,
not the one in the jar.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So the question is, and I'm sure this is discussed in many of the commentaries, the super commentaries on the Rebbe's commentary. Meaning, ever since the Rebbe published this, there's been hundreds of pages written in unpacking the Rebbe's Haggadah. We've spoken about it. We've had classes on it, unpacking it. We kind of learned. We've had a few series already. A couple of years, we've been unpacking some of the Rebbe's Haggadah. And we saw how much depth there is in the few words and the few lines and so on and so forth. So I'm sure, I haven't done the looking at it yet, but I'm sure there's tons written on this. But I'll just put down some two points that kind of give us an idea of what we should be looking for if we were learning the Rebbe's Haggadah in depth. Why is this commentary coming here? Why is this commentary is now even being put into what context? In the context of Shulchan Aruch. Why not tell it to us at the beginning of the Seder? At the opening lines of the Rebbe's Haggadah, which actually begins on Erev Pesach, because the Rebbe's commentary in his Haggadah starts with the search of the Chumash the night before. Actually starts with Shabbos Haggadah. It starts with Shabbos Haggadah before Pesach. The Rebbe's first commentary on his Haggadah starts with about Shabbos Haggadah. The Shabbos Haggadah is the Shabbos preceding Pesach. Goes through a whole thing about why it's called Shabbos Haggadah. And then he gets into all the Erev Pesach customs. Gets into commentary on the search for the chametz, the commentary on the burning of the chametz the next day, the commentary on the Korban Pesach, which we read Erev Pesach, right? The Mincha, Erev Pesach in the afternoon. By Mincha, we read the order of what the Seder of Pesach used to look like. He comments on that. So if you're anyways commentating on Erev Pesach, why not put this commentary there? He's telling us at the end of Shulchan Aruch, oh, by the way, since yesterday you weren't supposed to be eating any of these things. Good question. Yeah. Now, presumably, on a simple, you following my question? Tell you no.
Is this out of this?
The Rebbe's commentary is on Shulchan Aruch.
Yeah.
So on Shulchan Aruch, he's telling us what to do when.
During the Pesach meal.
No, but what's actually the comment? Don't eat since Erev Pesach.
Right.
So on the Shulchan Aruch, he's giving us a comment about maror, charoises, and about not eating it before Pesach started. So why are you commenting now on the Shulchan Aruch? Tell us to us on our Pesach.
Right. So it's too early or too late for him to say this.
Way too late. We're in the middle of the Seder already. We're already in the middle of the Seder. We went through the whole day of Erev Pesach already. You're giving me a commentary starting from yesterday afternoon, and now you're telling me something I was supposed to start yesterday.
Yeah.
Or earlier this morning.
Yeah.
Meaning if someone followed the Rebbe's Haggadah from the beginning, and doesn't know anything, he'll be eating Roman lettuce all day. And then when he comes to Shulchan Aruch, it says, oh, I wasn't supposed to be eating Roman lettuce today.
Yeah.
So this piece is on the back of the Rebbe's Haggadah?
It's in the Rebbe's Haggadah on his commentary on the Shulchan Aruch.
But it's not in the order of the
commentary on Shulchan Aruch, not the Shulchan Aruch, the Code of Jewish Law. Shulchan Aruch as in step number 10 of the Seder, have the meal.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
So when he tells us the customs of the meal, he says, oh, by the way, you're not supposed to be eating any of these items since this morning.
So that's not included in the early parts of the Seder.
No.
Instruction.
That's correct. He doesn't put this instruction. He doesn't even put the instruction when he tells you to make charoises. He doesn't even tell you there, by the way, these items which you're putting in the charoises don't eat since this morning.
Right.
By the instruction of how you eat maror, he doesn't say, by the way, don't eat maror since this morning.
That was done.
He doesn't even tell us by the instructions of the day before. There are instructions given about how you observe Erev Pesach, And he doesn't say that, by the way, today don't eat these things.
Right. And also, furthermore,
on his commentary on how you eat the meal, that's when he tells you don't eat.
Yeah,
Right.
It's a funny thing.
Too late. It's also this 10th step. You're already having the meal.
Exactly.
It could be that a lot of people don't follow that condition and doesn't want to highlight. So
No, right from the beginning, he puts at the beginning all the Chabad customs. He'll say what the halach is, and he'll say, by the way, the Chabad custom is X. Or he'll say, I seen observed in my father-in-law's house, the Rebbe's of Chabad were X. He would do that.
Put it as the primer.
I'm sure there are commentaries on this.
Yeah.
Now, on the simple level, we could assume that the Rebbe, as a publisher, the Rebbe is expecting you to read his Haggadah before you come to the Seder.
Okay.
Like in preparation, read the whole thing, and then you'll know. It doesn't answer the question fully, but still. But if you're going to think of it that way, that the Rebbe is like expecting you to read the whole thing before, so you're prepared, right? Then maybe it comes here because what did he say? He said, beginning at Pesach until after Koirach of the second night, don't eat these things. Shulchan Aruch is right after Koirach. So it's coming now after Koirach because it's an instruction related to Koirach. It's an instruction related to the completion of your fulfillment of your mitzvah to eat matzah and maror, that you don't eat any of those things before.
It's too late.
It is too late unless you were supposed to. It's not completely clear in my head. Right, because look at the language. Let's look at the language after the parentheses. Haskell Nebuiker Erev Pesach, beginning from the morning of Erev Pesach, ad achar Koirach Shaseda Sheni, until after Koirach of the second night. We don't eat any of the items that go in. We don't eat any of the items that go into the charosis or the maror. So because the instruction ends after Koirach, he's putting it in after Koirach. Shulchan Aruch right after Koirach. Maror Koirach, Shulchan Aruch. Right? So so considering that the instruction
that
extends.
would make sense because then you shouldn't do the following day, right? Not eat
well, if you're reading the book in advance, so when you finish Koirach, he's telling you now is the time when you're allowed to eat these other items. These items of not after the second Koirach, but now you're allowed to eat, or if you're in Israel after your first Koirach, you're allowed to eat lettuce and nuts and horseradish and all the other things that go into these two ingredients.
I'm telling you that today you made a mistake, but next year be careful.
Right, so that's what you have to assume that he's expecting you to read the book before the Seder starts, not just read it as you're going along. Maybe the question's not fully answered, especially since he doesn't put this here as an independent instruction after Koirach. He puts it in his instruction on the meal on Shulchan Aruch after telling you a bunch of other things. After he told you should we don't lean. After telling you you're supposed to dip the egg into salt water. After telling you, by the way, don't make sure your matzah's not wet. And not even a new paragraph, like don't get your matzah wet, and then new paragraph. Up until this point, you shouldn't have eaten any of these things.
Didn't realize it.
In the same paragraph where he tells you not to eat wet matzah, that very same paragraph, he says, at Pesach, beginning from yesterday morning, you weren't supposed to eat any of these items. So, very serious question. I don't have an answer. I'm just telling you that if you were looking at Shulchan Aruch, not the Rebbe's Haggadah in depth, if we're looking at the Rebbe's Haggadah in depth, this is what we were doing. And the question struck me because, right, when we looked yesterday at the Haggadah, at the Shulchan Aruch, and the footnote said, right, the Shulchan Aruch said, don't worry, you can eat your apples on Erev Pesach, it's not a problem. Right, there's no big deal. The footnote said, by the way, the Rebbe writes in his Haggadah that we do keep this practice and we actually don't eat the apples in Erev Pesach. Right, that's what they put in the footnote. They didn't tell me where in the Rebbe's Haggadah to look. So I was looking through all the instructions in Erev Pesach, and I don't see it there. I'm like, why isn't it there? So I did a little word searching, and I see it's on Shulchan Aruch. I'm like, what? Why is it there? Don't know the answer. Just putting it out there that this is the kind of thing that we would have to really unpack.
Well, maybe this instruction is for the day you want.
It doesn't matter about the instruction. No, the instruction here is on step number 10 of the Seder. Eat during this instruction of how you eat your meal. Right? That's why I gave you the whole background. He begins by saying, we don't lean to the left during the meal. We dip our egg into salt water. We don't make our matzah wet. And also, since yesterday you weren't supposed to eat these things. That's exactly how it's laid out in his commentary on the meal. So we have to somehow unpack and see how this custom is somehow connected to the custom not to make matzah wet. And that's what's coming here. It has to somehow be linked. And on the most superficial level, it's linked because these are two extreme customs that the Code of Jewish Law does not necessarily require. Meaning, even though the Code of Jewish Law mentions the idea of not getting matzah wet, But the extremities he describes here, before you pour out water from one thing to another, make sure you don't make sure there's no crumbs in there. Don't put your don't wipe your mouth by macharim. It's so extreme. And by the way, here's some more extreme customs that we do that aren't mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch. In fact, the Shulchan Aruch says you don't have to worry about it, but we still keep that custom. Maybe that's the link somehow. I'm just saying.
Separated out that custom that comes in the Shulchan Aruch from the customs that are placed directly
in the meal. Say again.
Saying the customs that he mentions in the Haggadah, are more. I'm trying to think of the right word. More pertinent, stricter, perhaps, than the one he lays out in the Shulchan Aruch.
Oh, 100%. But it still should have been in the proper place. On Erev Pesach.
I'm trying to rule out that it was done inadvertently.
Oh no, of course it was done inadvertently. That's definitely not. They never had an intention to put it here. The question is what they were thinking. The answer to my question is not he made a mistake. The answer to the question is I don't understand, and I got to think about it more. Right? That's
there's a difference in the weight of the halacha with the one that's been pushed back into the Shulchan Aruch as opposed to those other ones that were done or said in a timely.
Maybe fashion. Either that, or it's somehow linked, to the custom not to get matzah wet, which is why they put in the exact same paragraph. It's not even a new paragraph; it's in the same paragraph. In the very same paragraph, it tells us how strict we have to be with making sure matzah doesn't go wet. It's that very same paragraph. He says
in the Shulchan Aruch part.
It's not. No, it's also in the commentary on the meal. Again, look at the page. It starts off on the top right with the word Shulchan Aruch. He's commenting on the meal, the right top, Shulchan Aruch, right?
Yeah.
Meal. And then he goes, list custom. Number 1, we don't lean to the left. Number 2, dip the egg into salt. Number 3, be careful not to make matzah wet. Number 4, since yesterday you weren't supposed to be eating nuts and lettuce.
Yesterday.
Hacham Erev Pesach, since Erev Pesach. Right? So it's like listed in there, in the same paragraph of the custom not to make matzah wet. So it somehow has to be linked to that custom, and that's what's coming up here.
Why are you singling out the matzah getting wet? There's other things.
Because it's in the same paragraph.
Well, so
look at the breakup of paragraphs.
Those other things, right?
They're not in the same paragraph.
No, they're not.
Look right there. Do you see 2 paragraphs? But there's 2 paragraphs. You see physically 2 paragraphs.
So the second paragraph here, this one?
That second paragraph there begins by saying, don't make matzah wet. And then the conclusion is, since Erev Pesach, don't eat these things.
Okay, I got it.
It's in the same paragraph there, which is why I'm assuming it's somehow linked to that custom. On the basic level, it could be linked to the custom because they're both extremes that are not required by halacha. Maybe that's why they're linked, but I'm looking for more. I'm sure there's commentary. Anyway, let's conclude there was commentary on this.
Right, because the mar in the previous paragraph, the mar is written in the Shulchan Aruch.
What are you talking about?
In the first paragraph.
One second. Sorry. Hi, I'm in the middle of a class. Is it okay? Can I call you back in like 20 minutes? Okay, I'm going to call you back. I'm sorry, I'm in the middle of a class. I'm going to call you back. Okay, so let's conclude on top left, yeah? I'm just putting a question out. I'm just saying like, if we were learning it rather in depth, what we would be doing. And I'm sure there are commentaries on this. Okay. This question. Yeah, I don't think I'm the first genius to think of this question. I'm 100% sure others did. I just have to look into what they wrote. Okay, let's go top left. After some time I found, says the Rebbe, that those who have the custom not to eat the chazeres, which is the other form of marar, the Roman lettuce. And indeed, this was the Rashba's custom, the Rashba being a 13th century Spanish halachic authority.
This is a new paragraph?
Top left. Yes, so top left column, new paragraph.
Talking about the
adding to this idea that we don't eat these things on Erev Pesach, he quotes the Rash. He says, "I found that there's indeed a custom of some who don't even eat chazeres, don't eat the marar, don't eat the Roman lettuce on Erev Pesach. Meaning not just don't eat their horseradish, which is the primary marar, but don't even eat Roman lettuce." Mm-hmm. And he says, the Rashba, following your...
Well, why would he have a new paragraph for that? If you're going with the argument about
good question
paragraphs, you try to link the similarity between matzah and
why wouldn't this be the paragraph? Exactly right. Yep, good question.
Yeah.
Good question. And then he adds another paragraph, top left, second paragraph. Lahoyer, I want to note. Asher Yosh Omrim, There are those that say, Shebizman Beis Hamikdash Kayam, during the time when the Beis Hamikdash stood, Hayu Oichlin Kol Hasoda, they would eat the entire meal, Biberches HaMoitzi Al Mini Batzekas, while making hamotzi on other fruit bread items that are not matzah. What kind of bread items would that be?
That rich matzah.
That rich matcha. Or, like Rashi points out, it could be matzah that wasn't guarded to be specifically for the Seder. Right? Because you have to, in order to fulfill the obligation for the mitzvah of matzah, you have to have matzah that's guarded specifically for the intention. And let's say it wasn't that kind.
Machine matzah.
So, let's say. Yeah. So they during the times of the Beis Mikdash, they would eat all of that, wash, have a full meal, koydem ha-seder, before the Seder. So they'd make Kiddush, have a full meal, including washing. Then the Seder would begin. After the meal. 4 questions, and so on. There's this opinion. Mitzvah, Pesach. And at the end of that meal, they would have, at the end of the Haggadah, at the end of the Seder, which is after your meal, they would then have matzah. This is temple times. Matzah, marar, and meat from the Korban Pesach. There is an opinion that says that. Although Rambam disagrees, and Rambam says their Seder looked exactly like ours. They had the Seder. They would have moitzi matzah, marar, Pesach offering, and then they would have regular meal. And at the end of the meal, they have another sliver of the Pesach offering to keep the flavor in the mouth, to be the last flavor in the mouth is a flavor of the Pesach offering, which we do for tzafon. We have matzah at the end.
Maybe it was the Haggadah they ate first, and then only the Pesach offering at the very end.
Who are we talking about? Which opinion?
The temple time.
There's 2 opinions in the temple time period.
The second one.
Rambam, I just said?
The one that you say there first, and then you're meat.
That was the first opinion, yes?
Oh, but
so,
you have to eat the Korban Pesach during the Seder.
That's at the end. Yeah. So this would be 2 opinions. Opinion A, make Kiddush, full meal.
Yeah, no, not that.
Including washing. Then do your Haggadah. Then moitzi, matzah, Pesach. Or marar, matzah, Pesach. Matzah, marar, Pesach, whatever. And then Pesach offering. Opinion A. Now Rambam disagrees with that. That opinion, the first opinion I just said, to have the meal at the beginning is an outlier. The classic opinion, which is Rambam, says, like we do, Seder first, and then you come to your meal, and before your meal you have your moitzi matzah, your marar, and your Pesach offering. Then you eat your meal, and at the end of your meal, eat a little Pesach again, so that's the last flavor you have in your mouth. Which we do when we have a little bit of matzah at the end, right? We have tzafon. Yes, we have a little matzah at the end of our meal, right? But then they would have had Pesach at the end of their meal. Following me or not?
Following, you're tired already.
Forget the reasons why you think you're tired. Everybody got full of energy. Forget tiredness. We're talking about halacha and practice. The halacha and practice without taking into consideration our tiredness. Halacha. What's the 2 different ways to practice in the olden days?
This may not be relevant, but I'm trying to follow along. When you have your Pesach meat, when you have you eat from the Pesach offering, you're actually eating it twice?
Yes.
I thought you eat your Haggadah first, and then.
Okay, so Rambam writes, in the same way we eat matzah twice. You know what Rambam's opinion is, and it's that you don't eat anything else until you first do all the mitzvahs that are upon you. You don't eat anything else until you first do all the mitzvahs that are upon you. Your mitzvahs are, and nowadays, post-temple times, matzah and marar, and then koyrach, which is a combination. And now have your meal. Now, there's another obligation that the last flavor in your mouth should be the mitzvah. So at the end of the meal, we eat matzah again. Safon. Okay. Now, Rambam says, exact same thing, just include Pesach offering. So you make your bracha on matzah, eat your matzah. Make your bracha on marar, eat your marar. Make your bracha on Pesach, eat your Pesach. And at the end of your meal, eat a little Pesach again. So that's your last flavor.
So in the temple times and in the future, Shannon will be the Pesach offering will replace the matzah that we eat today.
Yes, we'll have. Yeah, there's a mitzvah to have matzah too.
Oh,
but it'll replace the last matzah today. The last matzah we have is
I meant the last.
That's right. We have the last matzah today to remember the fact that they used to have the last flavor was Pesach. We have the last flavor matzah. Okay, but that's following our opinion, the dominant opinion. The Rebbe is telling us here in the context of the fact that there are people who eat or in the context of the custom that we have, not to eat before we eat our mitzvah items, he says you should note that there's an opinion which says that they had their full meal before they even touched any of the mitzvahs. That's the context in which this comes here. It flies in the face of everything.
Yeah, of everything.
But he's putting it on as a note. He's giving us a full rounded picture. So he's telling us, you should note. I'm sure there's tons of commentary exactly what Rebbe was trying to bring out with this. But Rebbe is telling us you should note that there are those that not only did they eat a whole meal, but they actually even washed before they had matzah. They washed and had other breads. And then they had matzah later for the mitzvah. No, it's not telling us certain practice. It's telling us an opinion. Wow. Actually, the opinion here is the Mordechai.
That's not practice,
it's an opinion about what the practice was in the temple times. This is it's the Mordechai, which is actually a student of the Maram. We're learning about on Shabbos. The Maram, his student is the Mordechai. He says from his teacher, the Maharam, that this would have been the practice in the temple times based on a Gemara about Rav Huna. Okay? They're bringing it up, presumably in the context of this whole custom, whether you should or shouldn't eat before the mitzvahs, so that you have an appetite. You should know there's an opinion which says in temple times they had a full meal before they touched any mitzvah, including washing for bread, which flies in the face of everything. It doesn't just fly in the face of the customs we have not to eat marar, but it flies in the face of the halacha that we learned the last week, which is no eating bread before you have the matzah. And what was the only bread that fell into that category? The rich matzah. And that was the matzah they washed over after Kiddush, before the Seder. Follow? So it's just, you should know.
That on purpose so that they
I don't know. Yes, on purpose.
Eat the matzah for the Seder,
at the
matzah
at the end of the time Seder. And your meal was first. Don't mix your meal and your Seder. Have your meal and then your Seder. That was their custom, which is okay. That's this opinion. For whatever reason, everyone discusses it. 1 second. What did he say?
A meal is a mitzvah too.
One second. Yeah, it's from Rav Huna, who says,
from the Gemara?
Yeah, that bread that came, a person can eat bread that was made by non-Jews as long as it's kosher for Pesach, or like machine matzah, let's just say, and as long as you eat matzah at the end for the mitzvah. So he seems to be saying, eat a whole meal first, including washing, and then have matzah at the end. And he actually puts in the footnotes, Rabbi 11, that the Alter Rebbe says in the Shulchan Aruch that if you only have one kazayas of matzah that's kosher for the mitzvah of matzah, one kazayas of handmade matzah, when should you eat it? At the beginning of your meal or the end of your meal? So he says, eat your machine matzah throughout your meal, eat your machine matzah, and at the end have your little bit of matzah at the end better, right? Which would be in violation of this idea not to have a full stomach before you get to the matzah. But it's better to do that than have matzah at the beginning and no matzah at the end. Having matzah at the end is the primary. Right?
That's a case like the wine when we were discussing. If you only have 1 cup of wine, same thing. You make some exceptions.
Exactly. That's right.
And you're stuck and you have to choose.
That's right. But here he's giving us an opinion which actually says that in the first instance they would do that. Which seems to fly in the face of everything. Which is why he doesn't say like, oh, he says lahar, like you should note that there's this other issue out there lingering.
But the only thing that you could say in their favor on that case is that they're not using the halakhically acceptable matzah when they're eating their meal.
Well, yes.
Shira.
Oh,
so that's why it's
but that flies in the face of what we learned, that you're not supposed to eat matzah shira from the 9th hour.
That's true too.
Right. So this is a big.
It's somewhere in between.
So we have to look at all all these opinions. But this is the Rebbe's commentary on, which of course, as you can see, it's practically what we took from this. That's right. So practically what we took from this is the custom not to eat anything that's in the marar or the charesis. That's the practice we took out of it. But beyond that, we got a window into why going to yeshiva is so much fun. Because we would spend the next 3 days trying to unpack all this and answer all the questions we just dropped. Okay, have a wonderful day. Good Erev Shabbos. And we have good news. Hopefully be a tranquil and peaceful Shabbos for everybody.
Amen.